I opened my eyes slowly. The smell of strong disinfectant filled my nose, and the bright hospital light made my head ache. My throat was dry, my body heavy, and there was a deep ache in my stomach where the surgery had been done. I turned my head, expecting to see familiar faces. My children, my grandchildren, maybe even my sister. They had promised. They had said, "Don't worry, Mom, as soon as the surgery is over, we'll be right there with you." But the chair beside my bed was empty. The curtains were still. The room was silent. My heartbeat quickened. I reached for the small table to find my phone, but it wasn't there. Instead, there was a thick white envelope. I frowned and slowly opened it. My eyes froze on the first line. Hospital bill, patient responsible, Mary Williams. Underneath was a total amount that made my breath catch in my chest. $38,672. They had promised to take care of everything. They had promised to visit. But now, not only was I alone, the entire bill was in my name. And then, the nurse walked in with a serious look on her face, holding another paper in her hand. "What is this?" I asked, my voice shaking. She stepped closer, her eyes filled with sympathy, and whispered something that made my world spin. "My name is Mary Williams. I'm 68 years old, and I'm speaking to you from Atlanta, Georgia. Before I tell you what the nurse said and how I got here, please make sure you subscribe, like this video, and click the notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. And tell me in the comments, from which part of the country are you watching? 3 months ago, life was simple. Or at least I thought it was. I lived alone in my little house on the east side of Atlanta. My children lived in other states, but we spoke often. I believed we were close. It all started when I began feeling the pain in my lower abdomen. At first I ignored it, thinking it was just my age catching up with me. But then the pain got worse, so bad that I could barely stand. I called my eldest daughter, Clara. She sounded worried and told me to go to the doctor immediately. The tests showed I needed surgery, soon. My children promised they would all come to be with me. The day before the surgery, the house was filled with calls and messages. "Don't worry, Mom," they said. "We've spoken to the hospital. We'll handle the bills. We'll be there when you wake up." That night, I slept with peace in my heart. I believed them. But when I was wheeled into the operating room, something small and strange happened. The nurse asked me to sign some papers. I was groggy from the anesthesia and didn't read them properly. She said, "It's just for procedure." I signed without thinking. After the surgery, I woke up to the empty chair. I thought maybe they were just running late. Hours passed. Still no one came. My phone was gone. I asked the nurse where my family was. She gave a vague answer. They said they'd be here soon. Later that evening, a young man from the hospital's finance office came in. He asked if I was ready to settle part of the payment. "What payment?" I asked. "My children said." "That's the thing, ma'am," he interrupted gently. "The account is in your name only. We don't have any other guarantor on file." My hands went cold. The nurse walked in at that exact moment with that other paper and whispered something that felt like a punch to my stomach. "They've discharged themselves from responsibility, Mrs. Williams. They signed a waiver before the surgery." I felt my chest tighten. The world tilted. I could barely hear the rest of her words. And then before I could respond, she said, "Also, someone came to your house this morning. They left this note." She handed me a small folded piece of paper. When I opened it, I saw a few short words written in shaky handwriting. Words that made me forget my pain, forget my weakness, and grab the side of the bed to keep myself from falling. The paper trembled in my hands as I read the words again, making sure my eyes weren't playing tricks on me. "Don't look for us. We can't help you anymore." It was signed with all 3 of my children's names, Clara, James, and Ruth. My lips went dry. My hands felt cold. My own children had left me here, after promising they would be by my side. I wanted to scream, but the tight bandages on my stomach reminded me that even breathing too hard would hurt. I looked up at the nurse, my voice barely more than a whisper. "When did they leave this?" "This morning," she said softly. "The hospital security saw them drive away right after." It felt like the walls of the room were closing in on me. I had just come out of surgery. I could barely move. And now I had no one. No phone. No money. A hospital bill that could destroy me. I asked the nurse for a phone so I could call my children, but she hesitated. I'm sorry, Mrs. Williams. Your children left instructions not to be contacted through the hospital. My heart sank deeper. Why would they do this? To understand why this hurt so much, I need to take you back to my life before the surgery. I raised my children alone after their father died in a car accident when they were teenagers. I worked double shifts, sometimes going to bed hungry, just to make sure they had food, clothes, and an education. I never imagined a day would come when they would abandon me. 3 weeks before the surgery, I was at home when Clara called. She sounded worried, almost frantic. Mom, she said. The doctor says you need surgery soon. We've all talked, and we're going to cover the bill together. You don't need to stress about anything. James chimed in on speakerphone, and we'll all be there. You won't go through this alone. I remember crying tears of relief. For a moment I felt proud that I had raised children who cared about me. They even visited a week before the surgery. We sat around my dining table laughing, eating fried chicken, and making plans for after I recovered. Clara even promised to stay at my house for 2 weeks to take care of me. But looking back now, there were signs I ignored. 2 days before my surgery, Clara came by with some forms for me to review. She said it was hospital paperwork, but she didn't stay for me to read it. Don't worry, Mom. It's just standard procedure. I've already handled most of it, she said, sliding it into my mail pile. The morning of the surgery, I noticed my children seemed distracted. Clara kept checking her phone. James avoided eye contact. Ruth barely spoke. I told myself they were just nervous for me. The last thing I remember before the anesthesia took over was them standing by the door, smiling faintly and saying, "We'll be here when you wake up." Now lying in this cold hospital bed, reading their note, I knew those smiles had been fake. The nurse broke my thoughts. Mrs. Williams, the billing office says they need a partial payment by tomorrow morning, or they'll have to start procedures for collection. Collection? I asked. Yes, she said, her voice low. That means they can take legal steps, even against your house. My stomach twisted. My house, the only thing I owned, could be gone. I told her I needed to go home immediately, but she shook her head. You can't leave until you're medically cleared. Unless you discharge yourself against advice. But even then the bill stays. I closed my eyes trying to calm myself, but all I could hear were those words in the note. Don't look for us. I decided right then I would find out why my children had done this to me. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the hospital felt louder. The beeping machines, the rolling carts, the distant footsteps. At around midnight, I heard something outside my door. It wasn't a nurse. The shadow was taller, broader, and standing still. Hello. I called out, my voice shaky. No answer. Then slowly the door creaked open. And the face that appeared from behind it made my heart stop. Because it wasn't a stranger. It was someone I thought I'd never see again. Someone who wasn't supposed to even know I was here. The figure stepped inside, and the dim hallway light fell on his face. My breath caught. Robert. It was my late husband's younger brother, a man I hadn't seen in over 15 years. He looked older, thinner, but his eyes still had that same cold, calculating glint I remembered from when we last spoke, the night of my husband's funeral. What are you doing here? I whispered, clutching my blanket tighter. He smiled faintly, closing the door behind him. Relax, Mary. I heard you were in a bit of trouble. My skin prickled. How did you even know I was here? Oh, he said casually, pulling up a chair beside my bed. Your children told me. My chest tightened. You've spoken to them? Yes, he replied, leaning closer. In fact, they came to me first before your surgery. They said you were going to be a burden. They didn't want to deal with your medical bills. I felt as if the room tilted. What are you saying? I'm saying, Robert continued, that they gave me your house in exchange for settling a debt they owe me. That's why they signed those waivers at the hospital. That's why you're alone here. I shook my head. You're lying. He smirked. Am I? You'll see soon enough. The paperwork's already being processed. I need you to understand why Robert's words made my blood run cold. After my husband's death, Robert came sniffing around, trying to convince me to sell the house and split the money. I refused. I told him it was the only stability my children and I had left. From that day he despised me. Years later, when my kids were grown, he stopped contacting us. I thought he had moved on with his life. But apparently he'd just been waiting. And now he was sitting beside my hospital bed, acting like he owned me. I tried to stay calm. Why would my children do this to me? I asked. Robert's voice dropped to a whisper. Because they needed money fast. And I gave it to them. But I wanted something in return. Your house was perfect. I stared at him, my heart pounding. You're lying, I repeated, though my voice was weak. He pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket and placed it on my bed. Read it yourself. With trembling hands I opened it. And there it was. A property transfer agreement, with my children's signatures at the bottom. My name was listed too. That's not possible, I said, my voice shaking. I never signed this. Robert's smirk deepened. You did, in the hospital the morning of your surgery. Remember those papers Clara told you to sign? You were already prepped for anesthesia. You didn't read them. But your signature is right there. I felt sick. Before I could say another word, Robert leaned in and whispered something that made my skin crawl. You have 2 days to leave that house once you're discharged. I've already arranged for someone to move in. I stared at him, my mind spinning. My body was still weak from surgery, but my anger was boiling. You won't get away with this, I said. He chuckled softly. Oh, Mary, I already have. He stood up, buttoned his jacket, and started for the door. But just before leaving he turned and said, Oh, and tell the hospital not to bother me about your bill. That's all yours. And with that he walked out, leaving me shaking, gasping for air. The next morning, I asked the nurse for my discharge papers. She told me it wasn't safe for me to leave yet, but I didn't care. I needed to see my house. When they finally wheeled me to the hospital exit later that afternoon, my knees almost gave out from weakness. I managed to get into a taxi. The ride felt longer than ever, every bump sending pain through my stitches. But when the cab turned onto my street, my heart stopped, because there was a moving truck in front of my house, and strangers were carrying my furniture out the door. The cab hadn't even come to a full stop before I opened the door and stepped out, clutching my stomach in pain. My legs felt like jelly, but the sight before me gave me a burst of energy I didn't know I had. Strangers were carrying my sofa, my dining chairs, even my old rocking chair, the one I used to sit in every morning while sipping coffee, straight into the moving truck. Hey, I shouted, my voice trembling but loud enough to turn heads. What are you doing with my things? One of the men looked at me, confused. Ma'am, we were told this stuff belongs to the new owner. This is my house, I snapped, hobbling toward the front door. And that's when I saw him, Robert, standing in my living room with a clipboard, giving orders like he was the king of the place. Robert, I yelled. He turned slowly, that same smirk on his face. Mary, I was wondering when you'd get here. Thought you'd still be in the hospital. I glared at him. You have no right to be in my home. Oh, but I do, he replied smoothly, holding up a folder. It's all legal. Your children signed over the property. You signed too, whether you realized it or not. And now it's mine. I wanted to tear the papers out of his hand, but my stitches burned with every step. Where are my children? I asked. Robert shrugged. Not here. Not answering calls either. Maybe you should ask yourself why they chose me over you. His words were like knives. I'd raised my kids alone. I'd sacrificed my happiness, my youth, my health, and now they were gone, taking everything from me. I turned toward the moving men. Stop touching my things. I never gave permission for this. One of them hesitated. Ma'am, we're just doing our job. You'll have to talk to the boss. I am the boss. I shot back. Robert's voice rose, sharp now. No, Mary. Not anymore. Get out before I have security remove you. I looked around my living room, my eyes landing on family pictures that were now piled in a box marked trash. My wedding photo, my children's school pictures, even my mother's old Bible. My chest tightened and my vision blurred. You're heartless, I whispered. Robert smiled coldly. Heartless? No. Just smart. I stumbled toward the hallway, desperate to grab something, anything that was mine. But just as I reached my bedroom, I froze. The door was open, and someone was inside. It wasn't one of the movers. It was Clara. She was sitting on my bed, holding my jewelry box in her lap, rifling through it. "Clara," I said, my voice breaking. She looked up, startled, and then her expression hardened. "Mom, you shouldn't be here." I stared at her, my heart racing. Why? Why would you do this to me? Why would you let him take everything? She sighed, standing up slowly. "You don't understand. We had no choice. We owed him money, and he said this was the only way." "You could have told me," I cried. Her eyes flashed with something between guilt and anger. "And what would you have done? You don't have that kind of money, Mom. We were drowning. This was the only way out." I shook my head in disbelief. "You sold your own mother's house and left me to pay my own hospital bill?" Clara's voice dropped, almost to a whisper. "It's worse than that." My stomach nodded. "What do you mean?" She glanced toward the window nervously, then stepped closer. "Robert isn't just taking the house. He's going to take something else from you. And once he does, you'll never be free from him again." My breath caught. "What do you mean, Clara? What else could he possibly take from me? He already has my house." Clara's hands shook as she set the jewelry box on the bed. "Mom, he's going after your pension." I felt the blood drain from my face. My pension, the one thing keeping me afloat, the small monthly check I depended on for food, utilities, and medication. "That's impossible," I whispered. "It's protected." Clara shook her head. "Not if you give consent. He has a plan. And he's already made the papers. He's going to trick you into signing them just like he did with the house. He says you won't even realize it until it's too late." My stomach churned. "Why would you tell me this now, after everything you've done?" Her eyes flickered with guilt. "Because I didn't think he'd go this far. Selling the house was one thing, but taking your pension? That's like taking the last bit of life you have left. I can't just watch that happen." I stepped closer to her, ignoring the pull of my stitches. "Then help me. Stop this." Clara's gaze darted toward the hallway. "I can't. He's downstairs. He'll know I warned you. If he finds out I told you about the pension." "Mom, you don't understand the kind of man he is. He doesn't just ruin people. He destroys them." I swallowed hard. "Then at least tell me how much you owe him." She hesitated, then muttered, 75,000. I almost collapsed. 75? Clara, how? She bit her lip. "Bad investments. Some gambling. James and Ruth were in it too. Robert bailed us out, but his help came with conditions." Before I could respond, heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. Clara's eyes widened. "He's coming." She grabbed my hand and whispered fiercely, "Whatever you do, don't sign anything. No matter what he says. Promise me." I nodded, my pulse racing. The door swung open and Robert filled the frame, his eyes narrowing at the sight of us together. "Well, isn't this cozy?" he said with a smirk. "Family reunion?" Clara quickly stepped back from me, putting on a neutral face. "We were just talking." "I'm sure you were," Robert said slowly, his gaze locked on me now. "Mary, I have some final documents we need to go over. Why don't you come downstairs so we can get this done?" My skin crawled. I knew exactly what documents he meant. "I'm not signing anything," I said firmly. His smirk faded, replaced by something darker. "Oh, I think you will. You see, I always get what I want." The tension in the room was suffocating. I could hear the movers still working downstairs, the clinking of dishes, the dull thud of furniture against walls. Robert stepped toward me slowly, like a predator closing in. "Mary, you're weak. Fresh out of surgery. You can barely walk. Do you really want to make this harder on yourself?" I stood my ground. "I've survived worse than you." His eyes narrowed to slits. "We'll see." He turned toward the hallway, then looked back at me with a cold smile. "Be ready in 10 minutes. I'll be waiting in the kitchen." Clara's voice was a whisper once he was gone. "Mom, you're in danger. If you stay here, he'll find a way to get what he wants." "Is here?" "Then I need to leave. Now." She bit her lip again. If you leave, where will you go? You don't have money, you don't have your phone and the hospital bill. I don't care. I cut in. I'm not letting that man take my pension. I took one last look around my bedroom, the room where I'd spent over 30 years of my life, and then moved toward the window. I was weak, but I'd climb out if I had to. Clara grabbed my arm. Mom, wait. But before she could finish, a shadow moved outside the window. Someone was standing in the backyard, looking up at me. And when our eyes met, my heart nearly stopped, because it was someone I thought had been dead for years. My breath caught in my throat. I gripped the window frame, squinting through the glass just to make sure my mind wasn't playing tricks on me. It wasn't a ghost. It was my husband, Daniel. The same Daniel who had been declared dead in a car accident 24 years ago. His hair was grayer, his face worn and lined with age, but I would know those eyes anywhere. Daniel, I whispered, my voice trembling. Clara turned to me sharply. Mom? What did you say? I pointed toward the yard with a shaky hand. Look, it's your father. Clara stepped to the window, her mouth falling open. For a second she just stood there frozen. Then she whispered, It can't be. But it was. Daniel raised a finger to his lips, motioning for me to stay quiet. Then he pointed toward the side gate and gestured for me to come outside. Clara gripped my arm, panic flashing in her eyes. Mom, if Robert sees him. Before she could finish, footsteps thundered in the hallway. Robert was coming back. I moved fast. I grabbed my old cardigan from the chair, shoved my feet into slippers, and limped toward the back door. Clara followed close behind, muttering, This is insane. We slipped out quietly, my heart pounding in my ears. Daniel was waiting in the shadows near the fence. When I got close enough, he reached out and pulled me into a tight embrace. I felt his heartbeat against mine. Real. Alive. How? I managed to say, my voice cracking. They told me you were dead, they showed me your coffin. His jaw tightened. It was all a lie. I had to disappear, Mary. For your safety. For the kids' safety. But I couldn't stay away any longer when I heard what Robert was doing to you. I pulled back, staring at him. You knew? You knew he was taking my house? That he was trying to steal my pension? Daniel's eyes burned with anger. I know everything, Mary. And I came back to stop him. But you have to leave with me right now. My mind spun. Leave? Daniel, I just had surgery. I can barely walk. We don't have time, he cut in sharply. Robert has people watching you. If he finds out I'm alive, he'll try to finish what he started all those years ago. The cold night air seemed to sink into my bones. What are you talking about? What did he start? Daniel looked at Clara, then back at me. Robert wasn't just after your house. He was the one who caused the accident that was supposed to kill me. I staggered back a step. No, you're lying. I'm not, Daniel said firmly. He wanted control of everything I had, and when I survived, I went into hiding. But now he's after you. Before I could process his words, the back porch light flicked on. Mary, Robert's voice boomed from the doorway. What are you doing out here? Daniel grabbed my hand. We have to go. Now. But before we could move, Robert's eyes locked on Daniel, and his face went pale. For the first time since I'd seen him again, Robert looked afraid. Well, he said slowly, his voice icy. The dead have returned. His hand slid into his jacket, and I saw the unmistakable shape of a gun. Robert's fingers curled around the gun's handle, his movements slow and deliberate, like a predator savoring the moment before the kill. Daniel instinctively stepped in front of me, shielding me with his body. Mary, get behind the shed, he said, his voice low but firm. I froze. My mind screamed move, but my body refused. Clara, still standing in the doorway, looked like she might faint. Put it away, Robert, Daniel said sharply. This doesn't have to get messy. Robert's smirk returned, though I could see the tension in his jaw. Messy? You disappeared for over 2 decades, Daniel. And you think you can just stroll back into town and ruin my plans? You mean your plans to steal from my wife and destroy my family? Daniel shot back. Robert tilted his head, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. Oh, Danny boy. It stopped being your family the day you ran away. I didn't run, Daniel said, stepping closer. I hid from you. The air between them crackled with hate. I could barely breathe. Robert's eyes darted to me. And you, Mary, always so trusting, so easy to fool. You still haven't figured it out, have you? I swallowed hard. Figured what out? That your dear husband here, Robert sneered, wasn't just hiding from me. He was hiding from the law. Ask him why he had to fake his own death. I looked at Daniel, my pulse thundering. Is that true? Daniel didn't answer right away. His jaw clenched, his eyes locked on Robert's gun. This isn't the time, he muttered. Tell her. Robert barked, raising the weapon slightly. I took a step back, panic squeezing my chest. Daniel, what is he talking about? Before Daniel could respond, Robert lunged forward, pointing the gun directly at him. Clara screamed, and in that split second of distraction, Daniel moved. He grabbed a loose garden rake leaning against the shed and swung it hard, knocking the gun from Robert's hand. The weapon clattered across the patio, landing right at my feet. Mary! Grab it! Daniel shouted. My hands shook violently as I bent down. I picked up the cold metal, my heart pounding so loudly it felt like the only sound in the night. Robert's eyes locked on me, and for the first time, I saw something I'd never seen in him before: desperation. Mary, he said, taking a step toward me. You don't have the guts. My fingers tightened around the gun. Try me. Daniel moved between us again, keeping his gaze locked on Robert. Leave now, and maybe I won't drag you to the police myself. Robert's lips curled into a cold smile. You think the police will take your word? A dead man? And a woman drowning in debt. Daniel's hand went to my arm. Mary, go inside. Lock the doors. I'll handle him. But before I could move, Robert's eyes flicked toward the side gate, and I realized we weren't alone. Two shadowy figures had slipped into the yard, both large, both moving fast. And one of them was holding a crowbar. Mother, my son said again, stepping into the hospital room. His voice had no warmth, only a cold sharpness that made the hairs on my arms rise. The folder in his hands looked too thin for how heavy it felt in my chest. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice trembling. I'm here, he said, setting the folder on the tray table. Because you've been very careless. And because now, everything you own is at risk. I froze. What are you talking about? He slid the folder toward me. Inside were copies of hospital documents, my hospital admission form, the surgery consent papers, and a large invoice with my name printed in bold red letters. Do you know how much this bill is? He asked. I didn't answer. My hands were shaking too hard. It's more than you have in your savings. And since you're now solely responsible, they can legally take your house if you don't pay. He leaned closer. I warned you about trusting them, but you still let them sign your name to things. I felt dizzy. So you knew? You knew they put this bill in my name. His jaw tightened. I didn't know until yesterday, but when I found out, I decided it was time to make some decisions for you. The nurse stepped back toward the doorway, sensing tension. My son's eyes followed her until she disappeared. What decisions? I asked cautiously. He smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile a son gives his mother. I've already started the process to sell the house. That money will cover your surgery, and whatever's left, I'll manage for you. My chest tightened. Sell my house? That's my home. You can't. I can, he cut in. And I will. You can't take care of yourself anymore. I'm just making sure nothing gets wasted. Something inside me snapped. You're not helping me, I whispered. You're helping yourself. He shrugged. Call it what you want. Either way, you'll be signing the transfer papers tomorrow. I stared at him, my pulse pounding in my ears. And if I refuse? His eyes went dark. Then maybe you won't get discharged from this hospital at all. My breath caught in my throat. What does that mean? He leaned down so close I could feel his breath on my cheek. It means I can make a few calls, and your bill will keep growing until you have no choice but to give me everything. I felt trapped, my mind racing. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed under my pillow. I glanced at the screen. The caller ID was hidden, but the message preview made my blood run cold. Don't sign anything. He's lying. I can prove it. Meet me at midnight. Before I could react, my son reached for my phone. "Who's that?" he demanded. I pressed the phone to my chest. "No one." He narrowed his eyes, then slowly walked toward the door. "Midnight, mother," he said, glancing back. "Remember, I control everything now." As soon as he was gone, I stared at that mysterious message again. Who was warning me? And what did they mean by proof? I stood frozen in my tiny kitchen, holding the letter like it was a live snake. My hands were shaking so badly that the paper rustled in my grip. I had just opened my mail, expecting maybe another get-well-soon card from someone at church, but instead, it was a notice from the hospital. And this one was different. The bill wasn't just for the surgery I had already seen. No, this one had an extra $18,600 added. The paper felt heavy in my hands. My eyes scanned the page over and over, hoping I had read it wrong. I hadn't. The words "second surgical procedure" were printed in bold letters, followed by my name, my address, and the date, the same day I was lying unconscious after my operation. I remember whispering to myself, "But I never had a second surgery." Suddenly my heart started pounding, and I felt a chill run down my spine. If I didn't have another surgery, then who used my name for this? I rushed to my phone and dialed the hospital's billing department. My fingers could barely hit the buttons because they were trembling. After what felt like forever, a woman answered in a calm, cheerful voice. "Billing, this is Cheryl. How can I help you?" I tried to keep my voice steady. I just received a bill for a second surgery that I never had. There must be a mistake." She asked for my account number and typed for a while. Then her voice changed. "It shows here, Mrs. Thompson, that you were billed for a gallbladder removal the day after your hernia repair. Is that not correct?" I felt like I had been punched in the chest. No. Absolutely not. I was still recovering from the first surgery. I couldn't even walk to the bathroom without help. There's no way I had another operation. She hesitated. I could hear the clicking of her keyboard again. "Well, it's signed under your name, and there's a consent form here with your signature on it." My mouth went dry. My signature? I hadn't signed anything. I had been asleep in a hospital bed, barely able to move. Someone had forged my name. A sudden image hit me, of my niece Leah, standing beside my bed the day before I was discharged. She had been holding a clipboard, saying something about just some routine papers that needed my signature. But I had been so groggy from medication that I could barely keep my eyes open. Did I sign something without knowing? Or had she signed for me? Before I could ask Cheryl anything else, she said softly, "Ma'am, I don't mean to alarm you, but you should know that this account has been sent to collections." Collections. That word echoed in my head like a warning bell. If this wasn't fixed, they could take my house. They could drain my bank account. Everything I had worked for could vanish. I hung up the phone, my breath coming in short, shaky bursts. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. I decided I would go to Leah's house that very evening. If she had anything to do with this, I was going to find out. The bus ride to her place felt like it took hours. My mind kept replaying every moment since the surgery. The promises they made to visit, the empty hospital room when I woke up, the first bill, and now this one. When I finally reached her street, I saw her car parked out front. My stomach twisted into knots. I walked up to her door, raised my hand to knock, but just as I did, I heard voices inside. One of them was Leah's. The other was a man's, low, deep, and unfamiliar. And then I heard it. Leah said, "She has no idea. By the time she finds out, it'll all be in her name, and we'll be gone." I froze, my hand still hovering over the door. My heart dropped into my stomach. I knew then that the surgery bill was just the beginning. That's when I decided I wasn't knocking. I was going to catch them in the act. So I slowly stepped away from the door, crouched behind the bushes, and listened. But then the man's voice said something that made my blood run cold. The doctor's voice was like a knife. "Mrs. Thompson, the surgery has been canceled. Your family said they can't pay the deposit." For a moment I thought I misheard him. My ears rang, my mouth went dry. "Canceled?" I croaked. "I'm already in the hospital bed. You told me yesterday I'd be in the operating room this morning." He sighed, as if this was routine bad news for him. Yes, but the hospital policy is clear. No payment, no surgery. Your family was supposed to clear the bill before 9 a.m. I felt my heart thump in my chest. My children had promised that they would come before surgery. They told me to just rest, Mama, and not to worry. Now they were nowhere to be found. I reached for my phone with trembling fingers. Called Lisa first. She didn't pick up. Then I tried Mark straight to voicemail. I even tried my sister, who had told me she'd drop by with flowers. No answer. The nurse walked in with a clipboard, avoiding my eyes. We'll need you to vacate the bed within the hour, Mrs. Thompson. There are other patients waiting. Vacate? I wanted to scream. I could barely sit up without pain. I'd been fasting for surgery, my stomach empty, my body weak. And now, instead of saving my life, they were pushing me out like trash. That's when the man from the billing office walked in. He placed a paper in front of me. Since you signed the admission forms, all charges up to this point are in your name. The total is here. My eyes darted to the number. It was more than my rent for 6 months. My hands began to shake so badly that I nearly dropped the paper. This is supposed to be in my son's name. He told me he'd handle everything. The man just shrugged. Ma'am, you're the patient. Your signature is here. You're responsible. I could feel the room spinning. My breath came fast. All the trust one had in my children seemed to be cracking like glass under my feet. But in that moment of shock, I remembered something that could explain why they vanished. And if I was right, it would mean they never planned to help me at all. It hit me like a bolt of lightning. The night before, when Lisa visited, she was oddly quiet, until her phone buzzed. She stepped outside, whispering, her voice tense. I thought nothing of it then. But now, lying in this bed, staring at a bill in my name, her expression from last night came back to me. The way she avoided my eyes afterward. I picked up my phone and called the hospital's billing office directly. I need to know something, I said, my voice shaking. Yesterday, who gave you my admission details? Was it my son Mark? The lady on the line paused. No, ma'am. It was your daughter, Lisa. She handled all the paperwork. My stomach dropped. And she put the bill under my name? Yes, ma'am. She said it was your insurance covering it. Insurance? I had no active insurance. She knew that. Which meant she deliberately put everything under my name so the hospital could chase me for payment later. I hung up, my hands cold as ice. This wasn't just forgetfulness. This was betrayal. The nurse came back with my discharge papers, avoiding eye contact again. We'll have a wheelchair ready for you soon. I stared at her, then at the door, and something inside me hardened. If my children thought they could abandon me here and leave me drowning in debt, they were wrong. I wasn't going to leave quietly. I picked up my phone again, this time calling a number I hadn't dialed in years. A number belonging to someone who'd once sworn he'd protect me no matter what. When he answered, his voice was deep and familiar. Grace? Is that you? After all these years? Yes, I whispered. I need your help. They've left me here to die. There was a long pause on the other end. Then he said something that made my heart race even faster. The man's voice was steady, but I could hear the urgency beneath it. Grace, stay exactly where you are. I'm coming for you. My grip on the phone tightened. You don't understand, Michael. They've left me with. I understand more than you think, he cut in. And when I get there, you're going to hear the truth about your children that you should have known a long time ago. My heart was thudding so hard I could feel it in my ears. Michael, my late husband's closest friend. The man who disappeared after the funeral and never came back. Less than an hour later, I heard heavy footsteps rushing down the hospital corridor. The door flew open and there he was, older, silver-haired, but still with that same piercing look in his eyes. He didn't even greet me. He just strode over, grabbed the bill from my bedside table, and scanned it. His jaw clenched. They didn't just dump this on you, he said finally. They've been planning this for months. I frowned. Planning what? Michael pulled a folded envelope from his jacket and placed it in my hand. I've been keeping this because I didn't know how to tell you, but now you need to see it for yourself. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. Inside were photocopies of legal documents, ones I recognized immediately. They were property transfer forms, and my signature was on them. Except I had never signed anything. My vision blurred. Michael, what is this? They've been forging your signature, Grace, he said quietly. Your children have already sold your house. And now they're making sure you're left with nothing. Not even the roof over your head. For a moment, the room seemed to tilt. My children, my own blood, had taken everything from me while I lay here thinking they cared. Michael leaned closer, lowering his voice. And there's more. Lisa and Mark didn't do this alone. There's someone else behind it. Someone you won't believe. Someone else. I whispered, my voice almost gone. Who? Michael's eyes locked on mine, and I saw both anger and sorrow swimming there. Your late husband's brother, Daniel. I froze. Daniel? That's impossible. He barely spoke to me after Robert died. Michael shook his head. That's what you were meant to believe. But he's the one who's been pushing your children to sell your property and drain your accounts. He convinced them it was their inheritance, that you were just wasting money on hospital bills. The betrayal burned hotter than any physical pain I'd felt in my body. But why would Daniel? Michael cut me off, his voice low and sharp. Because your land isn't just a home, Grace. There's something under it, and Daniel has known for years. I blinked at him. Something under it. Michael glanced toward the door, as if expecting someone to walk in. Then he leaned so close I could smell the faint scent of tobacco on his coat. Oil, Grace. Your husband found it before he died. He was planning to tell you, but he never got the chance. My hands trembled. I tried to speak, but my throat tightened. All the pieces began to click into place. Daniel's sudden kindness after Robert's death, his strange visits to the children, the quiet meetings in town I'd never been invited to. They want me gone, I said slowly. So they can take it all. Michael nodded grimly. And if you don't act now, they'll succeed. They've already set a date to have you move to a care facility. Once you're there, they'll claim you're too unwell to manage your affairs. The walls of the hospital room suddenly felt like they were closing in. How do you know all this? I asked. Michael hesitated. Because I've been working with someone on the inside, and they've risked everything to get me this information. I stared at him, my pulse racing. Who? Michael's lips pressed into a tight line. You'll meet them tonight. But you have to be ready, Grace, because once you know the full truth, there's no going back. Night came like a heavy curtain, and with it, the uneasy quiet of the hospital corridors. Nurses moved in hushed steps, their rubber saws whispering against the floor. My room was dim except for the pale glow of the heart monitor beside my bed. At exactly midnight, Michael appeared again, not through the main door, but slipping in through the side entrance where laundry carts were usually pushed. Are you ready? He whispered. I nodded, though my legs still felt weak. He wheeled me out, every turn of the chair making my heart pound faster. We moved down hallways I'd never seen before, until we reached a maintenance door. Michael tapped twice, paused, then tapped 3 times. The door cracked open. A woman's face appeared in the narrow gap. Older, lined with years of both kindness and caution. She stepped back to let us in, closing the door quickly behind us. Grace, Michael said softly. This is Margaret. She's been working here for 23 years. And she's the one who found out what Daniel was doing. Margaret's eyes were sharp, even in the dim light. Your husband trusted me once, she said quietly. I helped him keep records of every deal he made. Before he passed, he gave me a box, told me to give it to you if anything ever happened to him. My breath caught. A box. Where is it? Margaret glanced toward a locked cabinet in the corner of the room. She pulled out a ring of keys, her hands trembling slightly. When the cabinet opened, the scent of old paper and dust escaped. Inside was a small wooden chest, worn but solid. This, she said, is why Daniel wants you out of the way. Michael placed it on my lap. My fingers hesitated at the brass latch before finally flipping it open. Inside were bundles of documents, maps, and shockingly, a small velvet pouch. I opened the pouch, and out spilled several uncut gemstones, glinting in the low light. What is this? I whispered. Margaret's voice was steady. Proof. Your husband discovered oil on your land, but also found a vein of gemstones nearby. If Daniel gets control, he'll be richer than you can imagine. The papers here prove your legal ownership, Grace, but if they disappear, so will your claim. Before I could speak, a sharp sound echoed in the hallway footsteps. Michael's face tensed. They're coming. Margaret quickly snatched the chest back, shoving it into a hidden compartment behind the cabinet. The door handle rattled once, twice, and then a man's voice called out, "Grace? It's Daniel. We need to talk." The sound of his voice sent a cold shiver down my spine. Daniel wasn't knocking gently now. He was pushing against the door, each shove making the hinges groan. Margaret mouthed, "Don't say a word." Michael moved toward the door, placing his body in front of it. "You can't come in here," he called firmly. Daniel's voice dropped to a low, dangerous tone. "Michael, step aside. You don't know what you're getting yourself into." Michael didn't move. Instead, he reached for a wrench lying on the nearby tool bench, gripping it tightly like he was ready to use it. Daniel chuckled, a sound that didn't match the tension in the air. "Grace," he said louder now, "you're making a mistake. I've been patient, but that patience is gone. I know what Margaret's hiding from me. And I know you have it." Margaret leaned close to my ear. "If he gets that box, you'll lose everything. Do not let him in." But then silence. For a moment I thought he'd left. My heart slowed just a little, until suddenly the light above us flickered, and the sound of keys jingling came from the other side of the door. "He has a master key," Michael hissed. "We've got seconds." Margaret rushed to the cabinet, yanked the chest from its hiding place, and thrust it into my arms. "Take it and run. Michael knows the back exit." The key slid into the lock. My pulse hammered in my ears. The moment the latch clicked, Michael yanked me toward the far corner, where a narrow maintenance tunnel sloped downward. We disappeared inside just as the door flew open behind us. From the darkness, Daniel's voice boomed. "Grace, you can't hide forever." The tunnel was cramped, the air heavy with the scent of rust and damp concrete. Michael pushed my wheelchair as fast as he could, the metal wheels rattling over the uneven floor. Behind us, footsteps pounded. Daniel had followed. Then I saw it. At the end of the tunnel was a grated door leading outside, but it was chained shut. "Michael," I gasped, "we're trapped." Michael's hands fumbled at the chain, pulling and twisting, but it wouldn't budge. Daniel's footsteps grew louder, his shadow stretching toward us in the dim tunnel light. "Give me the box, Grace," he called, his voice echoing off the damp walls. "You don't understand what's inside, it's not for you." I clutched the chest tighter. "Then why are you chasing me like a madman for it?" His tone sharpened. "Because if it gets out, lives will be destroyed. And maybe, yours will be one of them." Michael's eyes darted around. He spotted a rusty pipe running along the ceiling and reached up, wrench in hand, swinging hard. The pipe burst with a hiss, releasing a cloud of steam so thick it filled the air between us and Daniel. "Now," Michael shouted. He hooked the wrench into one of the chain links and pulled with every ounce of strength. The metal groaned, then snapped. We stumbled out into the open night, the cold air biting my cheeks. But the moment my wheelchair hit the gravel, the chest slipped from my lap. It landed with a thud, and the lid flew open. Papers and photographs spilled out, fluttering like wounded birds in the wind. Michael froze. His eyes scanned the pictures, and I saw his face change. "Grace, you never told me your husband had a brother." My stomach dropped. "That's because he didn't." Behind us, Daniel's voice cut through the night like a blade. "Oh yes, he did. And that's exactly why you were never meant to see those." He stepped forward into the moonlight, and in his hand was a photograph of a man who looked exactly like my late husband, only younger, and very much alive. The wind tore through the clearing, scattering the papers into the darkness, but I couldn't move. My eyes were locked on the photograph in Daniel's hand. "That's not possible," I whispered. "My husband died 21 years ago. I buried him. I saw his body." Daniel shook his head slowly. "You saw a body, but it wasn't his." Michael stepped in, his voice sharp. "Daniel, enough with the riddles. Just say what you mean." Daniel's eyes flicked to him. "You're standing next to a woman who has lived a lie for half her life. And every day she thought she was grieving her husband." He was somewhere else, building a new life. With someone else. My chest felt like it was caving in. Why? Why would he do that? Daniel crouched, gathering the remaining papers into the chest. Because he had to disappear. He was involved in something far bigger than you, something dangerous. And if you'd known, you would have been in danger too. Michael frowned. So what's your role in all of this? Why hunt Grace down now? Daniel hesitated, and for a moment his mask cracked. Because he's gone again. Vanished. And I think he left something for her in that box. Something others would kill to get their hands on. I shook my head, my voice breaking. You expect me to believe my husband has been alive all this time and never once tried to contact me? Daniel's gaze softened. He did. More than once. You just never saw the letters. Michael turned to me. Grace, if that's true, then someone's been keeping those letters from you. The sound of snapping twigs echoed from the tree line. We all turned at once. And there, stepping into the moonlight, was a man I hadn't seen in over 2 decades. My breath caught in my throat. My knees went weak. It was him. For a heartbeat, I thought I was dreaming. The man in front of me had the same deep-set eyes, the same scar above his brow, the same crooked smile I'd kissed 1,000 times. Thomas. My voice was barely a whisper. He didn't move at first. He just stood there, breathing hard, like he'd run for miles to get here. Then slowly he stepped closer. Grace, it's me. Michael moved in front of me, his body tense. If you take one more step. But I put a trembling hand on Michael's shoulder. It's okay. My legs felt like water as I walked toward the man who was supposed to be dead. When I was close enough to see the flecks of gray in his hair, the tears in his eyes, the truth slammed into me like a punch. This wasn't some trick. This was real. You died, I said, my voice shaking. I buried you. Thomas's jaw tightened. I know. And I'm sorry. But I had no choice. Daniel's voice cut in from behind us. Tell her the truth, Thomas. All of it. Or I will. Thomas's gaze flicked to Daniel, then back to me. Grace, the night before the accident, I found out something that would have destroyed us both. I got tangled in something dangerous. People who would have killed you if they knew you were connected to me. I took a step back, my breath quickening. So you let me think you were dead? For 21 years. His hands shook. It was the only way to keep you safe. And it worked until now. Michael frowned. Until now? What's changed? Thomas's eyes hardened. They found me. And they know about you, Grace. Which means... He hesitated, looking between the three of us. Daniel finished his sentence. Which means they're coming. Before I could process the words, headlights flared in the distance, cutting through the trees. Engines roared. Thomas grabbed my hand. We have to run. Now. The sound of engines grew louder, rumbling like an oncoming storm. My pulse pounded in my ears. Move! Thomas barked, pulling me toward the back of the cabin. Michael stayed close, but I could see the fury in his eyes. He hadn't forgiven Thomas. Not for the years of silence, not for the pain, but right now, survival mattered more than revenge. Daniel ran ahead, yanking open the cellar door. This way. We scrambled down the wooden steps into the damp, narrow space below. The air smelled of earth and rust. Above us, heavy boots hit the porch. They're here, Thomas whispered. I clutched his arm. Who are they? He shook his head. Men I once worked for. Men who never forgive debts. Michael leaned close to me. Grace, you sure you trust him? I didn't answer. My heart wanted to believe Thomas. My mind screamed caution. The boots moved across the floorboards, then paused. A voice cold and low called out. We know you're in here, Thomas. And this time you won't walk away. The cellar door creaked. Light spilled down the stairs. Thomas reached into his jacket, pulling out a small pistol. He handed it to me. If they touch you, shoot. Before I could respond, a deafening bang echoed through the cabin. The door upstairs burst open and shadows spilled in. Michael grabbed my hand. Daniel stepped in front of us and Thomas aimed up the stairs. The first man appeared, masked, armed and moving fast. The shot Thomas fired lit up the cellar for a split second, but when the man fell, I saw his face. It wasn't a stranger. It was someone I knew. The man's body crumpled at the base of the stairs. My knees went weak when the mask slipped off. It was Aaron, my nephew, the boy I once fed in my kitchen, the one I had rocked to sleep when his mother was too tired. Aaron, I gasped, stumbling forward. What are you doing here? He groaned, blood pooling under his shoulder. His eyes darted to Thomas, then to me. I didn't have a choice, Aunt Grace. Boots thundered above us again. Whoever sent him wasn't alone. Thomas shoved me back. No time for this, more are coming. But I couldn't look away from Aaron. Who made you do this? I demanded. He coughed. You don't understand. They said if I didn't find Thomas, they'd kill Mom. Michael swore under his breath. Grace, we have to get out now. Daniel pulled a lever in the corner, and a section of the cellar wall groaned open, revealing a dark tunnel. Move. Thomas went first, scanning ahead with a flashlight. I dragged Aaron with me, my hands slick with his blood. Michael brought up the rear. The tunnel was narrow and damp, the air thick with the smell of mold. Every few feet, we could hear the men upstairs tearing the cabin apart. Halfway through, Aaron's grip on my arm weakened. Aunt Grace, I'm sorry. I never wanted. His voice trailed off. No. I whispered, shaking him. Stay with me. Thomas turned back, face pale. Grace, we can't stop here. If we do, none of us make it out. I looked at Aaron's still face, my heart breaking. But before I could decide what to do, the sound of boots started echoing from both ends of the tunnel. We were trapped. The beam of Thomas's flashlight swung wildly, catching the glint of metal ahead. Two figures stood at the far exit, faces covered, rifles aimed straight at us. Behind us, more footsteps pounded closer, voices shouting. We were boxed in. Michael's hand went to his sidearm, but one of the men in front barked. Don't. Drop it or she dies. The taller one nodded toward me. Thomas's eyes met mine. A silent don't move. From the shadows behind the gunman, a slow mocking clap echoed. A third figure stepped forward. Even before the light caught his face, I knew the voice. Well, Grace, after all these years still meddling in things you shouldn't. It was Samuel, my late husband's brother. The man who vanished after the funeral. The man the family never spoke about again. My chest tightened. Samuel? You're behind all this. He smiled coldly. I told them you wouldn't stop protecting him, he said, pointing to Thomas. You should have walked away. Thomas's jaw clenched. This is about the inheritance, isn't it? The one you forged papers for? Samuel's smirk faltered for a second, then returned. I have debts, Thomas. Dangerous debts. And you're my ticket out. Alive or dead, you're worth more than you know. The men behind us closed in. Aaron's limp body was still in my arms, and my head spun with fear and grief. Samuel stepped closer, lowering his voice. Grace, I'll give you a choice. Walk away right now, pretend you never saw any of this, and I'll let you live. And if I don't? I asked. His smile widened, and in the flashlight's beam, I saw the small black device in his hand, a detonator. You all die in this tunnel, he said softly. Starting with him. He nodded toward Aaron. The click of the device echoed in the damp air. Click your notification and comments on my story. Don't forget to subscribe and turn your notification on for more story about me. Thanks for listening to my story. God bless you.